wake of the rise of the newest generation of consoles, we've seen quite a boom in the remastering of relatively new titles. I know what you're thinking though. What do I think about it?
Remastered, Redux, Definitive, Complete, call it what you want, it's a very popular practice, particularly at the moment. Reproducing games from the previous generation with graphical upgrades, additional content such as quests and characters, along with, usually, existing downloadable content.
Can we just consider this for a moment? I don't know why it annoys me so much, but if you're purchasing one of these editions and it has DLC attached, it's a misnomer because it's no longer DLC anymore. You're not actually downloading the content from the web, you're just installing it from a disc. So I don't know why it bugs me, but we should have a different word for it. There's extra content, that works. But, you know, I'm just being a princess. And stop using the phrase digital download, alright? There's no such thing as an analog download. Download is sufficient to convey what you're talking about. I don't know why that bugs me so much, but yeah.
These titles are usually brought to the new systems in order to take advantage of the more powerful hardware on offer. Just recently, and perhaps most notably, we've seen Grand Theft Auto 5, The Last of Us, Tomb Raider, Sleeping Dogs, the Halo series, Metro 2033 and Last Light. Now, many people have expressed confusion tinged with a bit of annoyance over the fact that these basically new within a couple of years games have had time, effort and resources spent on them when there are older, better games, subjectively through the magic of retro goggles, that deserve the honour just as much, which by the way I agree with. However, it's pretty clear why, say, The Last of Us has been made a priority, at least initially, over older games. The Last of Us was released on the PlayStation 3 pretty much at the end of the console's lifespan. The game sold a boatload of copies on the PlayStation 3. However, follow this logic. Just say we're nearing the end of 2013. In the grand scheme of things, everyone who is going to buy a PS3 has already bought one. The PS4 is soon to be released, and crossover between the current Xbox 360 players and current PS3 players is guaranteed. A shitload of players, old and new, buy new consoles when they're released. The Last of Us was massively popular, and only saw the tail end of its own platform's lifespan. Therefore, it would be pretty safe to assume that with a new pool of players who never had a chance to play the game in previous generations, along with old players who love the game and are willing to purchase it again to see it look and perform better than ever before, you stand to make a lot more money. The Last of Us, thanks to its remastering, is now a new title that was released at the start of its console's life, and PS4 users, current ones, along with people who may buy one later down the line, are going to keep buying the game, the sales keep going up. When you have something so popular, and a potential pool of new users chomping at the bit to play a game that was only released on old consoles, which they may not own, it's almost stupid not to remake it for new systems. Look at the pattern. GTA 5, The Last of Us, Sleeping Dogs, Halo, Metro, Tomb Raider, all critical successes, all relatively new releases, all remade for new systems, and all selling well in their reincarnated states. There is admittedly a fair degree of range when it comes to new content. Some of them are more updates rather than actual remasterings, whilst others present a wealth of new content and previously unseen features. The Last of Us Remastered is pretty much the original game, with better visuals, frame rate and resolution etc, along with the extra content pack left behind. The re-released version of GTA 5, however, is full of new features as well as graphical upgrades, such as increased traffic and NPCs, new activities and items. Metro notably has a system in place so that new players that are used to the sequel, Last Light, can play the first game, 2033, with the more recent control scheme and game mechanics. I like that, I like when developers put the time in to make the re-released title actually worth buying again, and these remastered editions of gaming heavyweights have had many sales attributed to returning players from last-gen consoles. In the case of The Last of Us, GTA, and Metro Redux, I am one of them.
I do find it a tad concerning when in the case of Tomb Raider, the new edition was called Digital Definitive Edition. That word, definitive, kind of insinuates that the game I purchased originally was not the complete experience. I paid full price for it, now you're suggesting to me that I wasn't actually buying the complete product. A little bit of free marketing advice there for you, Square Enix.
I do agree that some much older games need love too. This is occurring in the case of a number of titles such as Resident Evil and Grim Fandango. Very excited for those two. It's not always a good thing though, however, as we saw with Konami's appalling attempt to recreate the horrific magic of Silent Hill. It wasn't very good, check it out. It's got to be done right. I would absolutely love to see an HD remaster of the Crash Bandicoot series, for example. The problem is, Crash Bandicoot is a very old title and is no longer in the public eye. Sure, people such as myself love it and often talk about it, however it's not being discussed en masse, certainly not on the scale that people talk about The Last of Us or GTA. That's not to say that a remake of Crash wouldn't do well, it's just that the people who make up a massive section of the gaming demographic, i.e. young people, might not even have played it, they just wouldn't be old enough and wouldn't have nostalgia influencing them towards a purchase in the way that I would. I'd love to see it though, of course, and it could be argued that the revitalisation of old titles like Crash could conceivably thrust the franchise back into the limelight. A number of old games are remastered very often, like in the case of Super Mario, which sticks to its retro guns, and even The Legend of Zelda, which is to a certain degree the same story over and over again, although some would not admit that. The new games that have been remastered are done with the intent to make more money, mostly for the benefit of the developer, make no mistake, to capitalise on a new platform, whilst older games, made obscure by the slow decay of time, would be remastered at a certain level as a treat for the fans, the players. I'd love to believe that developers have the best interests of all players prioritised at all times, and make video games purely for the joy of bringing us good experiences, but I think this fantasy is just a case of naivete. It looks like these games, along with the remastered release model, are here to stay, and I have to admit that I actually quite like it. The dredging of old concepts out of the mud of the past isn't a sign that we're running out of ideas, it just means that there's nuggets of gold within that mud that have not yet been completely consumed, and that's okay. I for one would like to see, along with the resurgence of old titles, a return to older concepts and settings, such as the Old West and my personal favourite, World War II. We don't lose anything by exploring these dated ideas, like many would want you to believe. Developers are always going to make new games and new franchises, and if we get some nostalgic delights and better optimised versions of more recent games, surely that's not a bad thing. The return to older ideas is actually predicted by gaming itself, as one of my favourite franchises, Fallout, operates on the premise that fashion and social trends such as architecture, technology and all forms of art are part of a cycle. And eventually we'll all be wearing suits and top hats and listening to Frank Sinatra and the Ink Spots whilst driving nuclear cars. Ah, the future. That's something I'd very much like to see become a reality. Although admittedly, preferably without the global nuclear war of 2077.
I'm serious about those World War II games, by the way. Some of my best gaming memories are from games like Medal of Honor and the older Call of Duty games. It's certainly a more interesting premise than shooting terrorists in the desert. I can go and see that in real life if I really want to. Not so with the fall of the Third Reich. Thank you very much for watching, and maybe sometime in the future I'll re-release this episode as a remastered edition with extra NPCs and improved visuals, if you like. See you next time.